Now it's the moment to introduce the speaker of tonight, and before that I would like to say a couple of words about Studio Erde as such. Well, it is really my pleasure to actually have you here. Studio Erde, Office for Anthropocene Landscapes, is a critical and collaborative practice based, as we already have heard, in Zurich and in Berlin. And Studio Erde stands for a responsible design approach within the Anthropocene, one that is planetary in perspective and maybe very earthbound and terrestrial in their methods. Their work engages deeply with the complexity of urbanized landscapes and territories, asking how spatial design can respond to intertwined socio-ecological and material processes. Studio Erde approaches landscapes, as you usually kind of state that, as polyphonic, multi-layered, multi-dimensional structures, overlapping layers of time, matter, atmosphere, shaped by the interactions of human and modern humans. Each design process, as how I understand it, is already a motion of care, a matter of care. And each design process begins with decoding these material cycles and these socio-ecological systems. Rather than smoothing over what's already there and the specificities of a place, the studio aims really to reveal its contradictions and its processes and the web of life. Their work spans from territorial strategies, speculative design narratives, object planning, but also artistic interventions. And across all scales, I guess collaboration is also a very, very intriguing element for you. And now I guess I've talked already quite a fair bit. I would like to introduce Marcel Tröger. He's one of the founders of Studio Erde. Marcel is a landscape architect and an urban designer. And you were trained at the TU Berlin and the ENSAB in Versailles. And just to mention a couple of things here. I mean, you and Studio Erde have acquired and have been recognized by numerous institutions and prizes. Just to name a few here, like the Lila Award for Young Professionals, the Landesine Portfolio Award, the Schinkel Prize, the Linné Prize, Europan 16, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And before founding the Studio Erde, Marcel had been working in renowned international landscape architectural offices, such as Vogt Landscape Architects and BGMR Landscape Architects. And Marcel has also taught design studios at PDO Cottbus and the Technical University in Berlin, and was part of numerous juries and guest critics in several institutions as well. He recently joined Hafen City University Hamburg as a researcher and as a lecturer, and you're currently pursuing your PhD entitled Principles for a Baukunst of the Anthropocene. Well, please join me to welcome Marcel Tröger as a fantastic start for LX Landscape Lectures with the theme Matters of Care, Matters of Land. And I would like to kind of hand over to you now. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, wonderful. I think I can already leave, no? I guess you already said everything I will now kind of go through. No, but thanks a lot also for those kind words, and also thanks for the invitation to come to Vienna and to present to you some of our projects, but especially in the beginning, our understanding of care and of, as we call it, polyphonic landscapes in the Anthropocene. I think this I could really skip because you talked about this really a lot now. Why the Anthropocene and why do we actually have to find another way of doing the things we do is that the Anthropocene really asks from us a new professional attitude and a new way of creating also responsible practice, because tools and the way we did projects probably don't work anymore, since we literally see that our world is burning. Arcadia, the romantic landscape we once were part of, is in crisis and is burning. And I think each of you can really feel this right now. You already also talked about this current socio-ecological crisis. I like to talk about this time of multiple planetary crises. We are inside a multiplicity of crises, which we kind of feel on a constant basis. And I think on the one hand, this can be really overwhelming and letting us kind of be depressive. But I and we in our studio, we believe that this is also a huge chance to regain a capacity to act and to understand this complexity which those multiple crises, biodiversity, climate change, actually pose on us, and to understand our role, a political role as designer. And in this framework, I always like to refer to this quote by Bruno Latour. A year, I think, before he died, it was during the COVID pandemic, where he sat down in an interview with Hartmut Rosa, a German sociologist. Maybe some of you know him. They sat down in Karlsruhe in the garden of the museum there, and they talked about Corona and the impacts. And they described that actually what we were seeing then was maybe only a rehearsal for the big theater piece yet to come. So having this in mind, we have to change how we work, how we see, how we regard landscapes, because, and I borrowed those categories by Eva Horn, where she describes the Anthropocene on a spatial level, because the Anthropocene challenges us to rethink space, to rethink landscapes, because, and you also already mentioned this, we are living in webs of entanglements, no? Interrelationships, which totally confront us with clashing of scales of time, the deep time, geological time, but also, maybe also deep future. So this really clashing of time scales, but especially also the clashing of spatial scales. I think we are really entangled on a material base, but also on an economical, geopolitical scale in those webs of interdependencies. And what is interesting is that, on the other hand, everything is quite latent, nicht fühlbar, latent. Only sometimes we kind of get a glimpse on how bad things are when there are heavy rain events, for instance. Suddenly you can feel it. But usually the Anthropocene is quite calm, except when it is not. And this also leads me to the word earth, erde, which we didn't take this word by accident as studio name, but we liked the clash of scales of time and space, what I already talked about, as metaphor for the situation we are in. Earth meaning, on the one hand, the very fertile ground, the humus, but also rubble, the dirt, but also the land, the territory, the planet, and it actually crosses as metaphor all those different scales we should care for in each project. And this also leads to maybe a new understanding of nature, or let's say nature culture in the Anthropocene, because this clash of scales also leads us to kind of break up borders. We got to know to love in between nature and culture, those clear divisions, which probably we won't get back, and we have to find new ways of describing landscapes. And this is a picture of Chernobyl, of the exclusion zone in there, where, and this is a quote by Violetta, my office partner, who wrote a book together with Günther Vogt, Paradise Now, the new borders of the garden, where they described actually those spaces as new gardens in the Anthropocene. Maybe also those are suddenly the wild spaces when the human has disappeared, but yet still very interwoven with human life because of radioactivity. So it's deep also in the DNA of the plants and the animals there. So this is maybe nature culture. And this then leads us to understanding landscapes as polyphonic frameworks, as polyphonic environments, manifestations of multidimensional entanglements. And it's really the question, and I brought some videos for this lecture. I hope you can hear them. We had some issues here. This is an art piece, a dance installation in Berghain during COVID, where Jakob Kudstensen, maybe some of you know him, a Danish artist, who turned the Berghain into a swamp, into a digital swamp. He called it Berl, like Berlin, like the origins of the word is swamp, and he created this amazing technical swamp landscape in a way in Berghain by kind of mixing manipulation of scans of the landscape. So he went into the landscape and he did quite precise scans of the landscapes, but then created this manipulation, and this artist, in a way, this dancer, moved around in this installation. I liked it because it's really about diving into and feeling complexity. And this is also what we're doing in our studio, what we at least are trying to do in the rush of the everyday business. I hope we can also talk maybe a bit about this, because we are really trying to reveal the complexity of each space we're working in. This is a snapshot of a project we did together with students and local stakeholders in Braunschweig, where we developed visions for the Campus Nord. And we started actually by creating a very big Wunderkammer of different objects, and kind of trying to see what the space, the materials and landscapes could tell us. And then by understanding what this polyphony of a space actually means. And polyphony is a method we are borrowing from music. Those are the origins, Mehrstimmigkeit. And it actually refers to this multi-dimensional soundscape of a piece. And we are translating this into the multidimensional understanding of landscapes, spaces. And we are also referring to writings by Bernadette Bonsoir-Vincent. She's a professor in Paris, and she coined this term temps paysage, timescapes, which in a way there are parallel lines to polyphony, and where she actually describes landscapes as sedimented layers of time with clashing rationalities, organisms, life cycles, and timelines. So it's really about this, how we can understand like the sedimentation of things and networks with very, very different and usually clashing understandings and wills. And we are doing this in our studio, but also in the university. I'm also, as Jennifer was also saying, I'm also teaching currently in Hamburg. And we are trying to understand a space with those different filters. It's kind of a method in progress, so we are constantly trying to reshape kind of this filter, but we are trying to really deeply understand each space out of those different filters. In the belief that by following those filters, by following water, by following plants, by following materials, infrastructure, we can firstly understand the interconnections. We understand where actually a space ends, because when we are doing competitions, we have a clear boundary. Like there's a Perimetergrenze, but the space doesn't end at neither a Perimetergrenze of a competition nor at a political border, but it actually is always in flux. And And I brought you this art installation here, this picture by Olafur Eliasson called Ice Watch, where actually he did this, that he brought like those very latent again, no? Those nicht fühlbare processes of glacier melting into the very heart of a city center. He did this for several city squares throughout Europe. I think this was in London, where he put those glaciers on a city square, and you really can become into touch with those melting processes. And I think this is also a bit our hypothesis. How can we create spaces which are meaningful sensorial landscapes, which really can make feel this, those entanglements? I talked now a lot about theory, but I brought also 4 projects with me, a collection of projects we did over the 2 years, I think. One is still running now in Tel Aviv in Israel. But I will start with, which is also on the cover of the invitation, a project, a very simple and temporary project in Zurich for the Wilder Platz, where I will talk about the role of material and the taking care of materials. Then I will talk about the project in Tel Aviv, which is currently on view in the Architecture Museum there in Lieblinghaus, which is part of a big exhibition on 100 years Garden City in Tel Aviv, where we created 3 installations and a digital map on the role of water in the central aquifer actually in the Middle East. And then we'll talk about our project at Haus der Statistik, where it's about sharing care. And I will end with a very large-scale project for Jüchen, which is in the Rheinische Revier. It's a project for a new city on the edges of the Tagebau Garzweiler, and where I will talk about actually our role in caring for territories shaped by extractions. Wilder Platz Zürich. It's funny that we're standing here in this, or that we are here, because it's quite a similar situation. Because this is the Zollhaus Kalkbreite. It's also a Genossenschaftsbau, a bit similar to the project here. And a big part of those Genossenschaft, they started to get interested in this leftover space here, which you can see here, which is kind of a fuck up of urban zoning, urban planning, in between. Like, we are right in the city center of Zurich. The train station is just here, the Hauptbahnhof, and Langstraße is here, so it's a very central area in Zurich. And this Brachfläche along the train tracks kind of turned into a terrain vague in the city, where local stakeholders and the Genossenschaft, they created the Wilder Platz. It's a community garden who invites artists, landscape architects to kind of temporarily play with the site and do things with it. And we activated this space 1.5 years ago during the whole year, but especially in the summer, after applying for a climate competition of the city of Zurich called Climate Now. They asked artist collectives, architects, to rethink the impact of art during climate change. And we, especially Violetta, my office partner, she and Awareness in Art, it's an artist collective in Bauteilen. It's a network of architects who are very specialized in building with local materials, reuse materials. We applied together with this proposition of cohabitations, how we can rethink the city in 100 years. And as part of this 1-year process of exhibitions, events, we developed this landscape intervention on Wilder Platz, in this garden, where we developed an installation which works only with material we found in the nearby environments, especially Wellerlehm. I don't know what's this in English. Sort of clay, which which is great because you can also mix it with a lot of rubble and waste materials, and different kinds of other materials we found, and we created this this installation, Tableau Sauvage, wild table, actually around I go here around several archetypes. So we played with this very linear space on a more figurative level, and we developed this this central table in the middle, which is made out of Wellerlehm, and which served during the during this those 3 or 4 months during summer, which served as stage for events, but also as table to eat together, to come together, but also as habitat for bees, but also for lizards, because we are, as I said, along the train tracks, and there are a lot of lizards there all the time. And right when we, and I go back here, when we built this project together with all the local stakeholders in the area, in different workshops, there were already lizards kind of climbing on us, being already kind of those new inhabitants of this space. And the idea was that we are developing something which can stay there, which can also disappear. And now some of the installations are being removed. So if you go there now, you will only see, I didn't bring, unfortunately, current images. You can only see the table, which is still there, kind of being there now on its own with the lizards. And as I said, this was also part of a bigger process. So we also are trying to always frame our projects within a bigger, understanding chain of events. And this was a big exhibition which kicked off actually this year in the Löwenbraukunst Areal in Zurich, with an exhibition which also Violetta was curating together with Martina from Awareness in Art, where they invited a lot of internationally renowned artists who work on this issue of cohabitation. And this also leads me then to the project we just now did for Tel Aviv, called Aquifer Machines, because here we ourselves did create installations for a museum. And we worked around the coastal aquifer, which is, I will show this in a bit, which is the aquifer, so the Grundwasserbassin connecting Tel Aviv with Gaza and Sinai. There's actually one water resource relating Israel with Palestine, Gaza, and Egypt, and this idea came out of the invitation we received from Lieblinghaus, which is the architecture center in Tel Aviv, because they are celebrating 100 years Garden City in Tel Aviv. 100 years ago, Patrick Geddes, very renowned city planner, but actually biologist, created the master plan for Tel Aviv. The Garden City Plan, which was the base for the extension of Tel Aviv. And 100 years later, the Architecture Museum is asking themselves, what can we learn from Geddes, but also what can we, how can we understand his theories? Because he was really about creating cities as organism, as network of different flows and actors. And we understood this invitation as challenge to rethink Beit Liebling. This is just a snapshot of my role, our chaotic way how we work. So this is always how we work together. Beit Liebling in the middle, being an interface, a water interface in between different flows of water. We created 3 installations, as I said, in different spaces in Beit Liebling, on the street, in one of the bathrooms, and on the rooftop. And accompanying those 3 installations, we worked on this dynamic cartography of the coastal aquifer. This is a video which is being shown also in the bathroom together with the bathroom installation. I will show you in a bit. So this is running all the time now in the museum, and it shows the different dimensions of this coastal aquifer. So what you can see here, this is the Nile. This is Sinai, the peninsula. This is Israel. Gaza is here. And actually the coastal aquifer, what you can see here, is actually connecting those now very heavily, as sadly probably all of you know, heavily separated areas. But actually they are sitting on one shared water resource. And we wanted to talk about firstly those interrelationships, but also, of course, how different water types are being used in the aquifer. So we worked on this map. I will just go through this a bit to tell you a bit what we did here. We looked at it on this big scale of the water system, the different wadis. The water systems, the swamp structures who were actually a big part of Israel, especially the coastal area, the central area of Israel, which got dried completely almost. But you had very specific plants there. For instance, the papyrus, which is also a very symbolic plant in the whole region. And of course, it's also part of this bigger network of agriculture, how to use also seawater, but also, of course, of this political arena, of this very, very loaded political tensions, military infrastructures, and how also military infrastructures are reshaping water systems. And then we did some zoom-ins also into two river cases. The Ayalon River, which actually connected Tel Aviv, or which connected the Mediterranean Ocean with the bigger swamp area around Tel Aviv, but which got totally transformed. Now, actually, with a highway being next to it, or being actually the river being in a highway, and those are some videos also from the canal where they took out the mud. And Wadi Gaza, on the other hand, which was the case study for Gaza, which quite is in the same. It was also this very swampy wadi structure, being but also very industrialized, urbanized. But then also, of course, very much destroyed in the course of the war. So the installations I will show you quickly, they are portraying three interfaces of the water systems and of this coastal aquifer. The very private scale, the bathroom, which we turned into a biotop. The roof tackles or activates the atmosphere by creating a dew catcher, ein Taufänger on the roof, and a fog shower, eine Nebeldusche on the street. And they actually relate to those different scales. Those are some images from the working process. So what we developed are three, in a way, plugins. So very, very simple interventions. The dew collector on the roof, which is collecting tau during the night, because there's a lot of tau actually being created also by the Mediterranean Ocean, which is a totally unused resource, but which could actually help also a lot. And it was also lightened, or it is lightened now also during the night, so it's also a bit like a lantern over the cityscape. The bathroom, as I said, is a sort of a quote to the transformation of the swampy wadi landscape. This bathroom we turned, as I said, into a biotop. We brought in papyrus plants from the Hula Valley, which is one of the last swamp areas in the northern part of Israel, where all our migration birds are also right now living there. And on the other side of the bathroom, over the sink, there's this movie running the whole time. So you always have this interconnection. And on the street, we developed this fog shower, which is a direct reference also to Patrick Geddes and his way of thinking cities as living organisms. So this fog shower is running now for 10 minutes each hour, and is kind of supposed also to surprise people who are walking by, but it's just a very simple plugin, kind of trying to say how Tel Aviv could adapt itself. The third project I brought with me tonight is our project we've been working on for the last 2 years, which is now where we are waiting now finally offers by Galabauunternehmen. So it's out. It's called City as Stage, Stadtbühne. It's a project we developed together with Ravin Winogrand, who was also here, I think 2 years ago also, for a lecture, and with Bell Architects from Cologne. It was a collaborative workshop, ein Werkstattverfahren, 2 years ago by the Senatsverwaltung Berlin to reimagine on a temporary basis. So this was kind of the condition for this project, to develop a project which is supposed to last around 4 to 6 years for very central spaces, squares in Berlin, this is Alexanderplatz here, being flooded with people during the uprisings in 1989, before the wall came down. So this was also the space for a very democratic space, actually, which led to the fall of the wall. And it's about those 2 central squares. It's in front of Haus des Reisens and Haus der Statistik, which probably a lot of you know, which in itself it's a very interesting project because it tries to develop the neighborhood differently, very collaboratively. And also part of the project is also this highway here. This was our proposal in this bigger network. You can see Alexanderplatz here and those 2 squares, Haus des Reisens and Haus der Statistik. This Tunnelanlage here with the roof and this connection to the bigger Karl-Marx-Allee Großwohnsiedlung. We call this Grünes Wohnzimmer. What we actually did, and I will come to the design in a bit again, what we did is, or we started actually this Werkstattverfahren by going deep into a research on how those spaces have been developed, how they developed during different times in terms of space, but also in terms of social networks, ecology. And what is very interesting about the space that, especially, and I go back again, this axis, the Karl-Marx-Allee, was it was the main representation axis of the GDR. There, and we've put some images here, there the GDR really represented themselves as a strong system. They built those red those red stages with all the flaggen. So they really made this, a very dramatic gesture. And but it was also, as I said, it's very democratic space on the other hand, where people came together to fight the GDR actually. And now it's kind of an in-between area, kind of an urban periphery. The whole Alexanderplatz area is in a huge transformation, but it lacks completely identity and atmosphere. And so we were looking for traces, to create identity. Also because it's only temporary, or not also, but because it was only temporary, we looked also for very precise things we could relate to and develop a strategy. So when we did the research, we found very interesting objects, elements, infrastructures, which were once at the space. Different churches, the St. Georgenkirche, for instance, here, which actually stood above the Platz in front of Haus des Reisens. This now becomes into St. Georgenhain, one of the main objects we developed. Or underground systems, there was a tunnel connecting the 2 sides of the street. There were quite political gestures of the GDR, like this XX, but also more hidden traces, such as we call this dunkle Spuren. Also, the area was also, there was a Seniorenheim for Jewish people, which was also being destroyed, or the people got deported during the Nazi regime. So we were kind of in between this whole histories of the space. And what we actually did, and what we proposed for this Werkstattverfahren, was a strategy which worked with objects rather than with a big Platzgestaltung. We identified those. I go quickly here. We identified 15 objects. We called them Katalysatoren der Imagination, and they serve as structural objects, creating relationships in between each other, but also creating identities for those spaces. And as you can see here, this is a model. We worked with this model also for this workshop procedure. And it was supposed to be a bit cheesy, using very flashy colors, also quite ugly Modellbaumaterialien, but also referring a bit to the color scheme that GDR had, like this red, for instance. We will color those existing lamps there, for instance. And there's this Stadtbühne being developed, and a big part of the project is a Betreibersystem, because the challenge from the Senatsverwaltung Berlin was also that those spaces won't be taken care by the city administration, but it should be taken care by and maintained by an association. Or this is what we proposed, because all that is actually street land, like legally. Straßenland. It's not öffentlicher Freiraum, it's Straßenland. And the city, they won't take care of it during the time of the project. So we proposed this Freiraumverein, which also now was being established half a year ago, and where we created, this was for the workshop procedure, where we created sort of a process with different happenings and stuff. This was the opening event now almost 2 years ago, where we activated some of those spaces more on a poetic level, with light, with the choir of the Statistik. Es gibt den Chor der Statistik. It's an association inside this association, and they made with us this lyrical walk around those objects, and we activated the objects by reading poems and singing songs together. And behind the project lies also the understanding that those objects, they will build circularly, only with materials from the nearby areas, almost only reused materials. Now, as I said, we did the Ausschreibung and the execution. It's not that easy, and that's also maybe an interesting thing we could also talk about. It's try to be there, but we are trying to really stay close to this idea of creating those closed systems. And for that, we are also cooperating with tree nurseries, with Baumschulen in the region, by actually taking their trees, which they usually would throw away. This was also a project Violetta already did before, together with an artist, Andreas Kreiner. It's called Wild Woods. They propose saving trees, because actually it's a really, really big number of trees each tree nursery is just throwing away each year, because they slightly didn't grow in the perfect shape. So those are, for instance, some of those trees they just gave us for free, because otherwise they would throw them away. And those trees, they will find, or they already found, a new space at Haus der Statistik, and they will be either on the St. Georgenhain, which is an elevated platform where the former church stood, or on the Verkehrsinsel. And And to end, because I don't know how with time, to end, I will talk about the biggest project we are doing currently, or which we actually 2 weeks ago we finalized. We presented it to the city administration and to Landfolge Garzweiler after 2 years of working together with Octagon Architekturkollektiv from Leipzig, after winning also this big competition for the redevelopment of this part of the edge of the Tagebau Garzweiler. So this is the open mining pit of Garzweiler, which is part of the bigger Rheinisches Revier, which is the sister and the west of the Lausitz in Germany. And as you know, hopefully Germany and the whole Europe will step out of coal extraction in some years, and this actually leaves those spaces, those wounded spaces, those spaces of extraction. It will leave them open and open for new narratives. And this competition 2.5 years ago asked to develop a new city, or they said a new Stadtquartier, on those edges of Jüchen, which is here, which is one of the villages which are around the Tagebau. Also under here were also 2 villages which were destroyed for the coal mining pit, which is a story of a lot of those mining pits. But what we could find now, and this is a picture 1 year ago, when we did an excursion with students from Basel Kunsthochschule, where we actually stood on the new Abbruchkante. So RWE already filled up the space where Neujüchen will be. So the former Abbruchkante already moved inside a big hole, but you still can see and feel this vast extraction landscape being there. But it's interesting because RWE is, of course, a very problematic project partner in a way, but they are also responsible for filling in a way and to recultivate this whole. So they bring in a lot of topsoil, very, very fertile soil. This is Lössboden there, to fill up the hole. But during the competition, we were challenged with the problem that the soil is still very unstable. So we cannot build there for 15, I think it was around 15 years. We can't build there any buildings, maybe some infrastructure. And this was actually a starting point for a story we developed for this, actually for this new landscape around the forest. We developed a strategy which first develops a forest and then develops a city out of a forest. We proposed Neujüchen as new city landscape, a circular city landscape being developed out of a very, very productive forest structure, and in a time process of, and those are pictograms we proposed for the competition. And actually what we proposed is a process of 100 years where we can, and this is now the first process or the first time span where we can develop actually the city out of a very clear and harsh grid of different forest structures into this new city landscape by using, of course, also the building material of the forest. Now, during the last 1.5 years, we further precised or made we made this diagram more precise. We developed step-by-step actions to really have a chance to make this become live. What is also great now is that the Tagebau Garzweiler, they also got the commission to develop the IGA 2037, or the International Garden Exhibition there. So Jüchen will be also part of this main exhibition in a way. And so there is a clear time frame now. Until then, first parts of those forest structures could be developed and also first interventions. So the city will be developed in steps. And maybe I will also quickly talk about the general layout. As I said, we developed a strategy based on a very rigid grid because and this is maybe also a bit in difference to the other projects we're doing, because before I always talked about traces and working very specifically, but here we work on a space. No, I go back here where everything is new. There are no traces, and we actually had to create a new systems, and we use this grid structure, which also can be criticized and which was also criticized a lot because it was used so much already in architectural history. And we are also, of course, referring a bit to the Broadacre City by Frank Lloyd Wright and other projects who worked with the grid. But for us, the grid and this also, I think after now 2 years, was the right choice. It's a very robust system which can really hold together this whole concept, and which creates a very robust framework. And the framework is based around this loop, this Innovationsboulevard, which is an energy but also mobility axis leading to 4 neighborhoods, and in between those neighborhoods, different typologies of agroforestry are being developed. In the west, we have those agroforestry fingers, which are also there to prevent heavy west winds, because it's a very, very windy area, and they also serve as windbreakers, but they of course also create building material. We have in the middle a swamp forest, which is bit in a lower topography, because formerly a river flew there. And in the east, we have more of a porous, but also agroforestry, structures. And this leads to this notion of this landscape as kind of a meshwork of city and landscape, of very rough landscape images and atmospheres. We imagine a city where you can actually live with and inside different forest topologies. In the east, we propose different kinds, as I said, of agroforestry, which could be also, those are, for instance, Hanfplantagen, which could be very dense hemp forests, or those more, this would be for the east, for instance, for this more garden-related structures, more of Halboffenlandschaften with hay structures, for instance. And the idea was also that also the urban design, the Baufelder, that they are always in interconnection with those landscapes. So we developed those rules for each edge, how it should relate with the landscape, so that we have a very strong interconnection, not only on a spatial level, but also on a programmatic level. For instance, there will be Mietwälder here, where you could also, on your own Baufeld, have your own forest. And those are now images from the final model we just did now for the presentations. This is now looking from the east through one of those Obstplantagen towards this swamp forest in the middle, and those agroforestry fingers in the west. And the idea, as I said in the beginning, is of course that the forest, the landscape, is actually the main producer in this city, producing the building material for the city, but also in the future, also for the outside. We made also a lot of calculations on how much wood material could be produced during different cycles of wood production, but also how animals could be part of this, structure. Animals, but also different productive systems. And those are some, model images. So we worked also a lot with those models, where we try to kind of reveal those different, atmospheres which could come alive. And that's it. Thank you.